Welcome back to the second video on making decisions. This is chapter 4. Last time we mentioned that we can declare variables that are bool variables. That is, they can hold true or false. And these variables are used to remember the outcome of a decision. These variables are called flags. And if the variable has a true value, it means that we have tested some condition and it was true. Otherwise, it was false. So here's an example. If you're reading in a monthly payment for your bill and you're asked for the month, it makes sense to make sure that you have a valid month. So if someone were to enter a minus or a negative value as the month, that doesn't make sense. And if you notice that the month is invalid, so let's talk about this. So I read in a month, I compare the month. If it's less than 0, we would say the valid month is false. And then we can say when it's time to make the monthly payment, I only make the monthly payment for a valid month. So we'll say if the month is valid, then calculate the monthly payment. There's one little warning. When you have floats, sometimes it's hard to test for equality because floating point numbers are not quite as exact when the numbers are very, very, very close together. So it's better to use greater than or equal or less than, or to check whether a value is close to another value. That is, check the difference between two values. We'll do more of that when the situation arises. Now we're going to talk about other kinds of decisions. The decisions we made before was what I call a one-sided decision, where there's an action to be taken only if the condition is true. Sometimes we have decisions where we take one action if it's true and another action if it's false. This diagram, by the way, is called a flow chart. And it says the sequence of actions that's taken is to evaluate the condition. If it is true, then the next action is to do the consequence. That is the part that we do when it's true, and then we flow out of the decision. If the decision is false, we have another action to take, which we call the alternative. This is a visual. The code, the syntax of the if statement is shown below. This is called an if-else statement. There's one action when the if is true. There's another action when it's false. So we see that the if is followed by the consequence. If there's an alternative, it has to follow the if statement. So here's an example. Let's talk about it. If the condition is true, the consequence is executed and the alternative is skipped. And if the condition is false, the consequence is skipped and the alternative is executed. This basically gives me a decision where we do either this thing or some other thing. So here's some examples. Let's embellish what we had before. Before we simply said you pass if it's greater than 60. Now let's say if you didn't pass, we're going to give you a message also. So let's take a look at our example here. And let's read it. It's the same as before. We have added what? This statement here, we gave a name to it. We called that what do we call it? We called it consequence. And we said that if I say else, what follows the else is called the alternative. So when this if statement is encountered, I'm going to do one thing or the other. I'm going to either say you passed or I'm going to say sorry you did not pass. Okay? So let's take a look at this one. It's the same thing. So we're going to say there's a consequence which in this case occupies two statements. There's the alternative that occupies just one. Notice the indentation there to keep track of where the consequence is and where the alternative is. So let's run this and see. I'm going to enter a score of 40. What do we expect to happen? We do not expect to be told you passed. We're going to say sorry. And we're going to go down here. We're not going to say wonderful job. We're going to say maybe an A next time. That's what we expect. So let's take a look. Okay? Let's run it again. And let's enter a score of 62. And you pass, and maybe you get an A next time. And finally, we enter a score of 92. And you passed. Wonderful job. Right? Now there's yet another construct which represents a little more complex decision where you have a lot of choices that you can make, and you go down the list of choices. For example, we say, if it's raining, I will take an umbrella. Otherwise, if it's windy, I'm going to take a hat. And otherwise, if it's sunny, I'm going to take sunglasses. So I'm making a chain of decisions that I'm trying to make. All right? And I'm going to stop this chain once I find a condition that is met. And the syntax of this is this. We have an if, and then we put the words if and else together. What does this mean? It means condition 2 won't even be considered if condition 1 is true. Likewise, condition N will not even be considered if any above it is true. And notice that we have on the end just an else by itself. And it kind of says, when all else fails, we're going to do this. We take some action when none of the others apply. This else is called the trailing else. Here's an example, very common. If I want to look at the assignment of a letter grade, what are the choices? Either the grade is an A, B, C, D, or F. So we go through a series of decisions. We start trying an A first. What's the condition for an A? Average is greater than or equal to 90. If that fails, let's check for a B. So we say else if. If that fails, we're going to say else if average is greater than or equal to 70. And go down the list. Once we've exhausted A, B, C, and D, there's only one other choice left, and that's an F. All right. Now here's another example. If you want to classify a student as a freshman, what's the rule? We say a freshman has less than 30 hours, a sophomore has less than 60, a junior has less than 90, and boom. So if you have less than 30, you're a freshman, end of decision. Otherwise, if your hours is less than 60, you're a sophomore. So we go down the list. When we have checked for freshman, sophomore, junior, and still have not made our decision, we're left with the student being a senior. Notice that we can do the same example in reverse. We can start at the high end and say, are you a senior? Yeah, if you're greater than or equal to 90. Otherwise, check for a junior, sophomore, freshman. Okay, that ends this brief.